The topics in this presentation do not supersede or replace any local, state, or federal regulations. All work shall be performed in accordance with the OSHA regulations, as well as the facility's policies and procedures. Welcome to Bridgeport Energy, where safety is a core value. Working safely is integral to every job we perform here. We expect the same from you. The Bridgeport Energy plant management and staff are committed to working safely and are available to address any safety concerns which may arise during your time here. All contractors working at this facility will undergo the safety orientation prior to accessing the plant. You will then be issued a dated contractor safety sticker to place on your hard hat. Site orientation training must be performed annually. All workers shall have completed applicable safety training from their own company prior to starting work on site. The health and well-being of our employees and visitors is of the utmost importance. Both CDC and state guidelines in regard to infectious disease will need to be followed to enter and work inside the facility. This may include, but is not limited to, pre-entry screening, continuous self-wellness assessment, social distancing, and the use of face coverings. There are multiple areas of the facility that are protected by NERC security requirements. Ask your contract coordinator if you require NERC access. If you do not require NERC access, then you may not enter these areas unless escorted by a Bridgeport Energy employee. Perimeter gates must be closed and locked when not actively in use. No gate shall be left open unattended. Removable and transient media such as USB drives, laptops, and external drives may not be plugged into any Bridgeport Energy computer or controller without obtaining permission from your general manager. If you need to use such a device, contact your contract coordinator for guidance. Bridgeport Energy reserves the right to conduct searches and inspections of plant property or any part of an individual's property that is brought onto the plant site. All activities while on site are monitored and recorded by cameras located around the facility. Never operate any plant equipment without the plant's explicit permission. Stay clear of all pumps, motors, and valves, as they may start without notice. Let's take a look at the site. Notice the primary building and major equipment locations. The administration building, which contains the control room and the warehouse. The contractor safety trailer. The Demon water tank to the southeast of the facility. The fire pump building. The gas yard to the south of the facility. The main power block is the turbine building, which contains both gas and the steam turbines. The two HRSGs, Unit 11 and 12. One MCC shack is located on the east side of the admin building, and two to the north of the turbine building. Part of Bridgeport Energy, but located on Bridgeport Harbor Station property, is the seawater intake. Your contract coordinator will instruct you on how to access this area. All contractor personal vehicles must park in the designated contractor parking areas, as seen highlighted here. The speed limit leading up to the plant and inside the plant boundary is 5 miles per hour for all vehicles and motorized equipment. All contractors and visitors must go directly to the visitor's safety trailer and sign in to the visitor's logbook for accountability in case of an emergency. There is no admittance to the admin building. Please remember to sign out before leaving. Large groups of visitors, such as during outages, may be required to sign in at an alternate location. A Bridgeport Energy employee will be assigned as primary contact for all visitors and contractors. Each contractor company is to assign a person as a contractor coordinator. Weapons, drugs, and alcohol are prohibited inside the gate. Bridgeport Energy reserves the right to search all personal property. No level of impairment is permitted while on site. Any type of harassment or aggressive behavior that has the potential to do physical or psychological harm to someone or disrupts the work environment will not be tolerated. Bridgeport Energy uses 29% aqueous ammonia on site. Ammonia is a colorless, highly irritating gas with a sharp, suffocating odor. If at any time you detect an odor, you should immediately leave the area and contact the control room. Special precautions need to be taken when working on or near the ammonia equipment and piping. Other chemicals used in process include hydrogen gas, natural gas, propane, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, argon, sodium hypochlorite, diesel fuel, turbine lube oil, hydraulic oil, transformer oil, steam mate, and trisodium phosphate. In the event you are involved in an incident, accident, injury, unplanned event, fire, or hazardous condition, immediately contact the control room on radio channel 1. or 203-332-8690 to report the issue. Be prepared to tell them where you are and what has happened. In the event of an incident that would require a plant evacuation, pertinent information will be transmitted over plant radios on Channel 1 and on the plant's PA system. You will evacuate to the designated muster points. These locations will be highlighted later in the presentation. Once the evacuation notice has been given, work must be stopped, confined spaces cleared, and all personnel must evacuate to the designated evacuation point. An employee roster will be taken to the muster point, where you should remain available for roll call until you are released. A person will be assigned to retrieve the sign-in log and take roll call. Bridgeport Energy has 2 designated muster points as seen here. The primary evacuation point is adjacent to the main gate. The secondary evacuation point is to the northeast gate leading into the Bridgeport Harbor Station. Bridgeport Energy has specific emergency response procedures to deal with emergencies on site. Please ask your contract coordinator for further information on what responsibilities you may have. The control room will call 911 for all plant emergencies to dispatch police, medical, and fire services. Portable fire extinguishers are located throughout the facility to be used in the case of an emergency. If more than one extinguisher is discharged and the fire has not been extinguished, workers shall evacuate. These extinguishers are not to be used for routine hot work fire watch. Only use a fire extinguisher if you are trained and you feel it is safe to do so. Fixed fire protection systems are also located around the facility and utilize different types of extinguishing media. If at any time any portion of the plant's fire protection is used, damaged, removed, or obstructed, the control room must be notified and the area evacuated. Fire alarm pull stations are located throughout the plant. The fire alarm, which sounds like the following, will sound for notification of fire. Evacuate the facility to the nearest muster point and await further instruction from plant personnel. Good housekeeping must be maintained at all times, not just at the end of a job. Do not allow waste paper, cardboard boxes, and other materials to accumulate. Always maintain aisles, exits, and keep emergency equipment free of all obstructions. Oily rags and waste shall be disposed of properly in drums located on the oil containment skid. Report all emergencies, accidents, injuries, near misses, and unsafe conditions to the control room. When required, the control room will contact the police, medical, or fire services as needed. Following all accidents and injuries, a written report of injury shall be completed by end of shift and submitted to your Bridgeport Energy contract coordinator. There's an automated external defibrillator, AED, located in the control room, medium voltage switchgear, room number 11, and the intake building. The first aid kit is located in the control room. Safety shower and eye wash stations are located throughout the facility, where chemicals are handled and stored. Bridgeport Energy treats all environmental events seriously. If you see any spill or chemical release, even if you think it's small or insignificant, report it to the shift supervisor and control room immediately. Plant personnel, once notified, will initiate procedures to control active leaks, clean up spills, or sound evacuation alarms. No liquids are to be poured down any drain, pit, or ground. All stationary gasoline or diesel-powered equipment must be placed in or on a secondary containment. All site safety data sheets, or SDSs, are maintained with an online database and in hard copy in the control room and are available for your review. All chemicals that are brought on site must be reviewed and approved prior to coming on site. You will be required to provide SDS documentation for all approved materials that are brought on site. Contractors are required to ensure all primary and secondary chemical containers must be properly labeled in accordance with the hazardous communication standard upon arrival and throughout the product use. The contractor is responsible for the proper use, storage, and disposal of all materials brought on site. While on site, the standard PPE requirement for all contractors, visitors, and Bridgeport Energy employees will consist of a hard hat, steel or composite-toed boots, safety glasses with side shields, hearing protection, and hand protection. Even if your task does not call for specific hand protection to be used, it shall still be immediately available for you to be worn. All Bridgeport Energy employees are required to wear arc-resistant clothing in all areas of the plant, except in the administrative areas. Contractors are required to wear either arc-resistant or flame-resistant clothing while on-site in all areas of the facility. Your work will be evaluated prior to the issuance of a purchase order. If your job requires specialized clothing to be worn, it will be documented in the purchase order. If the safety evaluation identifies that arc-resistant or flame-resistant clothing is not required for the scope of your work, a clear route to and from your specific work area will need to be both identified and strictly followed to ensure they do not get exposed to any specific arc flash or fire hazards. Contractors are responsible for providing and maintaining approved PPE for their employees and subcontractors, as well as providing training in PPE selection, use, and care. The only exception to this is in designated break areas or admin building and parking lots. Sometimes specialized PPE is required to perform your work. Such specialized PPE may be welding goggles, respirators, fall protection, flame or arc flash resistant clothing, and specific chemical gloves and suits. Face shields are required to be worn while grinding and cutting with angle grinders and circular saws. Any work that must be performed at or above 4 feet is considered elevated work. Workers in elevated positions outside of approved walkways must be protected from falling by a guardrail system, safety net system, or personal fall arrest system. All contractors are required to provide their own PPE and fall protection as needed. When the need arises to don fall protection, anchor points need to be determined prior to any tasks that will require fall protection. You must inspect your equipment every time you use it. Personal fall protection is required whenever working from or traveling in aerial equipment, such as aerial lifts or man baskets. If you have questions about fall protection or appropriate anchor points, contact your primary contract coordinator. Smoking and vaping are prohibited throughout the plant, except in designated areas. As seen here, the smoking areas are north of the contractor safety trailer and north of the Siemens trailer. Eating is only allowed in designated areas. Any use of cell phones while walking or potentially in hazardous areas is strictly prohibited. If you need to use your cell phone, move away from your work area and ensure the area is safe before proceeding to do so. Contractors are expected to bring all required tools to the job site. All electrical equipment used on site must be properly insulated and/or grounded to ensure safe operation. All electric tools and cords shall be protected with a GFCI device. All tooling such as grinders that are made with guards must have guards properly installed and set correctly for use. If a specialty tool is required, contact your contract coordinator. No still photography or video recording will be taken without prior consent by plant management. When parking on site, it is recommended to use a spotter while maneuvering the trailer into position. Chocking or blocking of the trailer wheels in both directions is required. All tools are to be inspected prior to use and should be rated for the work they are intended to be utilized for. The use of tools for purposes other than designed shall not be permitted. Tools should be secured when working at elevation to prevent falling to areas below. Only fixed and fiberglass ladders shall be utilized at Bridgeport Energy. Aluminum portable ladders are strictly prohibited. All ladders shall be inspected prior to use. If a ladder is found to be defective, it shall be tagged and removed from service. All portable ladders shall be secured at the top where practical. If the 1 to 4 vertical height angle cannot be achieved, it must be secured. A ladder placed to gain access to a roof or platform shall extend at least 3.5 feet above the point of support to provide an adequate handhold. No type of work shall be performed on a ladder over 4 feet from the ground or floor that requires the use of both hands to perform the work, unless a safety harness is worn and the safety lanyard is secured to an appropriately anchored point. No employee shall work from higher than the 3rd rung from the top of a straight or an extension ladder, nor the 2nd tread from the top of a step ladder. Excessive side reach should be strictly avoided when working from a ladder. Chicago air hose connections must be protected with pins and whip checks to prevent serious injury due to the hose or coupling failing. Install pins and whip check at each hose connection and from equipment and air sources to the hose. Compressed gas cylinders must be stored upright, secured with a metal chain placed on the upper half of the cylinder, and when not in use, caps secured in place. Combustible storage locations must be discussed and approved by your contract coordinator. While working at Bridgeport Energy, it's every person's responsibility to keep work areas clean, neat, tidy, and free from excessive material at all times. Constantly put trash in the proper trash bins. Ensure hazardous waste, universal waste, recyclables, and large metal waste is properly segregated. Keep the floors free from excessive material. Ensure aisles and walkways are clear, unobstructed, and in good order. Ensure materials are stacked correctly and safely in the correct places. Take action to ensure that no items are obstructing fire equipment and electrical switchgear. Always return tools to their correct place after use. Ensure that spill and other tripping and slipping hazards are cleaned up or fixed. Ensure proper distances are kept from all electrical panels. Housekeeping is everyone's responsibility, and it is expected that your work area is clean at the end of the shift. The work permit is a process that is the centerpiece for all work to be performed on site and is required for all activities. It is issued by the shift supervisor in coordination with your contract coordinator. The work permit is good for one shift. Additional permits may be required for the work you are performing. Work permits must be signed off and turned in at the end of shift. Depending on your work plans, you may need additional safety permits, which may include hot work permit, confined space permit, or an electrical work permit. In addition, further approval will be needed for work on energized electrical equipment greater than 50 volts by the plant manager. No work shall begin until any additional safety permit has been approved by the shift supervisor. If any external or internal conditions change relating to your work, then a new review of the job hazard must be completed, including an updated pre-job brief before continuing with your work. Completing the job safety analysis section of the work permit is an exercise that is used to identify and mitigate specific hazards for a particular job. The steps include identifying the specific steps involved in completing your work process, the respective hazards of each step, and finally, how to mitigate these identified hazards. Your Bridgeport Energy contact can provide you with a work permit form if your company hasn't supplied you with one. Safety signage, cones, and tape or chain barricades are used to call attention to hazards but do not offer any physical protection. All barriers must utilize signage that communicates the reason for the barricade and note the date posted and who posted it. Those who post these areas are also responsible to remove the posting at the end of the shift or when the hazardous condition is eliminated. Yellow caution tape and signs are used when a safety barrier is needed, but imminent danger does not exist. Contractors may enter the area after determining what unsafe conditions have caused the barrier to be placed. Red danger tape and signs are used only when imminent danger of an injury or life-threatening condition exists. Individuals may not enter the area unless they are directly involved in correcting the hazard or have obtained permission from the person in charge. If your work will require the posting of red barrier tape, you must inform the shift supervisor. The area and work conditions will be assessed. Controlled, hazard-specific signs will then be assigned to you. Bridgeport Energy has a specific red tag procedure. Your contract coordinator will assist you with this process. Hot work refers to any job involving burning, cutting, grinding, welding, or an open flame or spark. Any of these types of work will require a hot work permit and a fire watch. Hot work permits are obtained with your work permit. Only plant personnel can authorize cutting and welding operations in areas not specifically designed for hot work. Prior to performing hot work in elevated areas, any equipment below shall be protected from sparks and slag. A 35-foot area around the hot work shall be inspected for combustible materials and removed or protected prior to any hot work. Wear appropriate PPE and make sure your job doesn't impact someone else. Use protective barriers if necessary. The hot work permit must be posted in the area where the hot work is being performed. A fire watch must be able to communicate with the control room via UHF radio channel 1 and possess a fire extinguisher. Extinguishers for hot work must be contractor owned. Mounted fire extinguishers in the plant shall not be removed from their designated locations and used for fire watches. A fire watch shall be maintained for at least 60 minutes after the completion of hot work to detect and report or extinguish possible smoldering fires. The hot work permit must be closed after completion of the hot work, and the fire watch has detected no signs of fire after 60 minutes and randomly for 3 hours after closeout. The fire watch must sign off the permit and return the permit to the control room. Remember, a permit is only good for one shift. If a fire watch extinguishes a fire, you must contact your plant contact. Before beginning work at Bridgeport Energy and during the work permit process, you, your point of contact, and the shift supervisor will meet to assess if your work will require you to be exposed to or be around any hazardous energy. All hazardous energy must be controlled through a process called Lockout tagout, or LOTO. You must ensure that the equipment is locked and tagged out in accordance with the site's Lockout tagout procedures. The site's Lockout tagout procedures will be followed without exception. All sign-on sheets, forms, and tags shall be filled out in a legible manner. Before locking on to any lockbox, contractors are given the opportunity to be familiarized with the system and with the controls in place disabling the system and isolating the hazardous energy from them while they work. This includes performing a walkdown with Bridgeport Energy personnel. Bridgeport Energy personnel make equipment safe by completing the lockout tagout process. The shift supervisor will then authorize you to sign on and lock on. The lock boxes are located in the contractor and visitor safety trailer adjacent to the permit area. In the case of using a satellite lockbox, the contractor work leader supervisor will sign on to the main lotto form and apply his personal lock to the specific lockbox, and then place his key in the satellite lockbox. You will then apply your lock to the satellite lockbox and sign on the satellite lockbox paperwork. The satellite lockbox may be taken to the job site, where contractor workers will apply their personal locks to it. The satellite lockbox and contractor worker personal locks will be under the local control of the contractor work leader supervisor at the job site. Ensure that all locks have one controlled key. Ensure that all affixed personnel locks have only one control key and have an appropriately affixed tag, which legibly indicates the employee's full name, company name, and employee's contact number. A confined space is large enough and so configured that an employee can bodily enter and perform assigned work, has limited or restricted means for entry or exit, and is not designed for continuous employee occupancy. Before beginning work and during the work permit process, you, your Bridgeport Energy point of contact, and the shift supervisor will meet to assess if your work will require you to enter a confined space. All entry into a confined space must be controlled through a confined space entry permit. All confined spaces on site are labeled with danger, confined space. No permit required confined space entry is allowed without first conducting a rescue plan, pre-job brief, lotto, and confined space entry permit. Depending on the scope of work inside the space, a hot work permit may also be necessary. Performing hot work inside a confined space will require a pre-job hazards analysis review by the shift supervisor, so that appropriate safety controls and procedures are initiated. A rescue plan and qualified rescue team are required for all permit-required confined space entries on site. Hot work shall not be performed on the interior, exterior, or near the opening of any confined space which may contain flammable or explosive vapors until these hazards have been eliminated through engineering controls. An attendant is required for all permit-required confined space entries. The attendant is an individual who monitors, manages, and records the movement of personnel in and out of a permit-required confined space. The attendant is stationed immediately outside the entrance of a confined space and will not leave this post while the confined space is occupied. The attendant records all entrants in and out of a confined space by full name and time of entry and exit. The attendant has the authority to stop work and evacuate the space at any time if an internal or external environmental change is observed. Confined space attendants have the ability to contact the control room in case of an emergency. An entrant is an individual who is qualified and authorized to enter a confined space. The entrant shall understand the hazards associated with the space and utilize proper PPE and procedures, including lotto, concerning these hazards. The entrant must maintain a line of communication with the attendant to request rescue and follow orders to evacuate the space. The entrant must receive permission to enter from the confined space supervisor. A confined space supervisor is the one person that gives permission for entrants to enter a confined space. The supervisor will verify conditions of the space do not change while the permit is open. The supervisor will ensure that the space is not occupied and is properly closed out at the end of every shift. All electrical work will be performed in accordance with the Bridgeport Energy electrical safety procedure. All personnel shall only work on de-energized circuits that are under an active lotto. If energized work is determined to be required, the contractor must be electrically qualified and competent and have been requested to perform electrical work, testing, or troubleshooting on live electrical equipment while on site. A live electrical permit is required at Bridgeport Energy. This permit applies to work being done on or near live electrical equipment, including testing and troubleshooting. Additionally, explicit permission from the plant manager is also required. In order to use installed scaffolding, scaffold must be inspected once per shift and display an inspection tag. One of 3 tags are attached on the scaffold at Bridgeport Energy: red, do not use; green, ready to use without a harness; and yellow, special condition where fall protection is indicated and special instructions may apply. Make sure you check the information on the tag before accessing the scaffolding. Forklifts and all-terrain vehicles must have a documented inspection prior to use each shift. Vehicles shall only be operated by personnel who are properly trained and have up-to-date qualifications. Bridgeport Energy requires each operator to provide proof of training prior to use. Only the authorized operator is allowed to ride the forklift during use. All controls, indicators, instrumentation, and markings shall be in place and legible. All vehicles shall be equipped with a fire extinguisher, horn, backup alarm, and seatbelts. During the work permit process, it will be determined if a spotter is needed. All Bridgeport Energy-owned power industrial trucks may be used only after receiving plant approval. All aerial lifts must have a documented inspection prior to use. Equipment shall only be operated by personnel who are properly trained and have up-to-date qualifications. We require each operator to provide proof of training prior to use. Aerial lifts shall not be used as a crane or material hoist. All aerial lift controls, indicators, instrumentation, nameplates, and markings shall be in place and legible. Operators' manuals shall be kept with aerial lift equipment at all times. The weight capacity shall be observed for each aerial lift. Personal fall protection must be utilized at all times while in aerial lift baskets. Sitting, standing, or climbing on basket tow boards or railings is prohibited. Planks, ladders, or other devices intended to increase working heights from aerial lift platforms are prohibited. Aerial lifts shall not be used, altered, or moved when the lift or any conductive material on them might come within minimum safe distances to energize the electrical lines. It is imperative that aerial devices maintain the appropriate minimum approach distances when working on or near energized electrical lines. The distances will be based on kilovolts, type of equipment being used, tasks being performed, and worker qualifications. When an unqualified person is working in an elevated position near overhead lines, the location shall be such that the person and the longest conductive object he or she may contact cannot come closer to any unguarded, energized overhead line than the following distances shown here. When a qualified person is working in the vicinity of overhead lines, whether in an elevated position or on the ground, the person may not approach or take any conductive object without an approved insulating handle closer to exposed energized parts, as shown here in Table S5, unless the person is insulated from the energized parts, or the energized part is insulated from all other conductive objects at a different potential and from the person, or the person is insulated from all conductive objects at a potential different from that of the energized part. To operate overhead or mobile cranes, contractors must provide a current training certificate. Slings and rigging must be inspected prior to arrival on site and prior to each use. The test cert should be marked or tagged on the equipment or documentation provided to show proof that all is current. Damaged or defective slings and rigging shall be tagged as defective and removed from service. Cranes involved in critical lifts are to have a critical lift plan in place. Thank you for taking the time to educate yourself on our expectations while working at Bridgeport Energy. Please remember that no job or task is of such great importance that it must be performed at the expense of health and safety. Your safety and well-being is of the utmost importance to us. Everyone must adhere to the site's policies and procedures 100% of the time. Violation of site regulations will be cause for immediate dismissal from the site. Your acceptance and compliance is appreciated. If you have a specific question that was not addressed in this presentation, please ask your trainer at this time. We will now complete the site safety orientation with a knowledge test.